Hi, I'm Judith. I'm, I don't know, 46, 47 years sober. I'm also in Overeaters Anonymous and in Al-Anon. Um, and this is a great opportunity for me because if I'm speaking at a 12-step meeting, I don't bring in Buddhism, right? That's against the traditions. But what I'm really passionate about is how do we integrate Buddhism? If you're a Buddhist or want to be a Buddhist or have a non-theistic God, that's a God that doesn't have a pronoun, it isn't a person, it's omniscient or everywhere. So how, in that context, how do you work the 12 steps? Because the 12 steps are definitely written in a Judeo-Christian language. And since I've been doing these workshops and talks, I used to do weekends of 12-step in Buddhism. I found that a lot of people were upset and angry because they were in the minority usually, and that they couldn't translate very well the steps into a Buddhist context. So I began, I think in 2004 was when I started doing this 12-step in Buddhism. And I have many, many talks on my website. So if you want to keep going with this, you could go to my website. Those are all from, I would say, 2004 to maybe 2007. Most of them, some of them are recent. I'm excited about this series because it will be my most recent work on how you interpret the 12 steps through a Buddhist lens. So that's why I'm happy that that's what you guys want. So good. We're gonna work with step 5 today. And this is step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrong. So this is the first step that includes a person. And that was kind of uh-oh for me because I was totally self-reliant. I didn't have very many friends. I was not very good at relationships and I didn't trust anybody. So, uh-oh, they're telling me not only do I have to have a relationship with another person, but I have to tell that person my secrets. So this is kind of hard if you're coming from the background that I came from. And yet this step of talking to another person about my life, the things that happened to me, my traumas, about how my attitude towards things, how that attitude obstructs my life, certainly obstructs the back and forth flow of love, which I now consider very, very important to my recovery, that my heart is not defended and I can receive love and I can feel it in my body, not just in my head, and I can love. But when I started a 12-step, forget about it. I didn't know anything about that really. So this is a little bit hard. You have to learn how to trust somebody. Lordy, how do you trust? And I think that's a learning thing. It's learning how to identify people who are trustworthy in your life. And in some ways, I'm still doing that now. Like, for example, in Al-Anon, I'm really trying to see, is this relationship mutual? Because for many decades, my relationship and sponsoring didn't help this. I was above and I was going to take care of you, or I'd give you advice, or somehow I was the giver. and learning how to trust people, learning that relationships are mutual, not so much if that's your sponsor or your psychotherapist, but learning what are the qualities of a person that you can trust. There's a fire truck. Can you hear it? Yeah. So that's the first thing, learning to trust. I was going to say again, but a lot of us didn't learn how to trust even as a baby. So, and this is a step, really, steps 4 through 9 are very important to me. They are the steps that I think are somewhat missing from Buddhism, or at least Zen Buddhism. They're the steps that really dig into what are the karmic obstructions, what are the behavioral obstructions, what are the woundedness that prevents you from feeling self-love, from having a good self-esteem, from being able to live in relationship with others, all those very wholesome and positive qualities, what block us from that. And I couldn't get, I'm not at home, so I don't have my library here, so I couldn't get the exact words, but I think it's in the promises of the program where it says, we clean up the wreckage of our past, but we don't shut the door on it. So to me, that's such a great paradox that I'm able to clean up my inner attitude, my character defects, what people did to me, the type of childhood that I had. I'm able to clean that up in my body mind so that I can be free of victimization, I could say, or being in prison because of what's happened to me in the past. And this is, so we identify that in 4. And in 5, I just can't say how important it is to trust someone, to begin to let someone in, and also to begin to feel what it's like to be accepted for exactly who you are. And also, even that person might love you or think you're great, you know, even if you killed someone. I know not all of us have that dramatic of a story, but some of us do. I worked at the prison for years, and those people have that kind of a past. How do you get beyond terrible things that were done to you and terrible things that you might have done? And step 4 brings them up to light, and step 5 is the beginning of letting them go, of allowing people to accept you, to teach you how to accept yourself, how to love yourself, and the beginning of being free of the things that entrap you. Now, most religions have some kind of confession, but I'm glad they didn't use the word confession, aren't you? Because there's so much shadow with that word, especially if you're Catholic. I'm married to an ex-Catholic, so I can't say the word confession in front of him. But I mean, and step 5 is basically the spiritual aspect of confessing, bringing to light, sharing what you have done wrong. And it's the beginning of the, this whole process of freeing up, cleaning up the wreckage of the past. And just that one thing I want to say, I think I thought when I first came into program that if I just shut the door on the past if I never talked to anybody from my past, if I never told anybody I was a Jew, for example, or if I just hid my whole previous life and started over, that would be the answer. And I could use the tools as the start over. But it is a start over, but it's not built on cutting off, or what's the word psychologically? I'm not going to remember it. It's when you cut something off and you push it aside, but it's not been digested. So it will haunt you. It will keep coming back unless you digest it. So we eat something, we digest it. Our the small intestine decides what is good for us that we can take in and what isn't good for us that we have to get rid of. The large intestine takes everything that we need to get rid of, and it gets it out of the body. So in a lot of ways, steps 4 through 9 is this type of digestion. But if you don't digest, it will haunt you. So that's why step 4 through 9 are very, very crucial if you are trying to have a spiritual healing of our very terrible addictions. Now we've tried, I can say we, but I can say I tried a lot of things. And if they had worked, I wouldn't be in program. But the essential aspect of program is, if you're an addict, if you're an alcoholic, if you're a compulsive eater, gambler, all of the things that come out of a compulsive addictive personality. In the beginning, that's what Bill found out. People said the only way to recover was to have a spiritual experience. So that's what we're trying to do. And in my belief, the 12 steps will enable you to have a spiritual experience. So going back to, where do you find a confession in Buddhism? So let me share my screen. Let's see, where does it say? Share your screen. Oh, here, it's over here. Okay, did we do it? You can see it? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go down one. So I'm from the Zen Buddhist tradition. So this is the confession statement. It's usually done in the morning service. For many, many years, I went to the Zen Center, meditated, and did the morning service. And we chanted this phrase. And I just got the inspiration. I'll chant it for you. All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born of my body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. And in the morning service, we would say that 3 times, and then we would go on to different chanting. Now, I sigh. For a compulsive person, that's just not enough, you think? Even though we say it 3 times, even though I said it every morning, it was not steps 4 through 9, the intensity, the detail, the digestion. And although there's a lot of digestion in meditation, because if you sit meditation, the things that are unresolved in your life will naturally arise. But I didn't find enough help in digesting them, where I found total help when I went to 12 step. So I'm going to stop sharing this for now. I'll come back. So also there's another Buddhist thing that was helpful, but it just didn't have the punch of what I did because I was in 12 step program. So we have a moon ceremony in Buddhism. It happens at the new moon and the full moon. So I think there's a possibility that this would work on a deep level if you were in a monastery, if you were the same group of people living together like a family, and you did this sincerely as a group, then it might have the power that you need. I did not do this. I did this in the city center. There were different people every time we did it. And I don't know, it wasn't enough. But in the moon ceremony, you do that repentance phrase, you go through the precepts, you decide which precepts you want to, you've been not doing well, you decide what precept you want to work on in the next month. So there was some nod to changing our behavior patterns, but this is my opinion. For those of you who are in Buddhist Sanghas, maybe your Sangha do it better than mine. But in my opinion, that simply wasn't enough, and especially for an addict. So that's how Buddhism, in some ways, handles confession. So the other thing I did, of course, I go to lots of meetings. I still go to a lot of meetings. Can you believe that? I thought I would be done. And I go to an Al-Anon meeting every single day in the morning. And the reason I do that is because it gets my head in the right place. It gets my head out of control. It gets my head thinking about letting go and letting God. And it reminds me of all the very wonderful and positive things about program that I really want to manifest. I don't want this to just be intellectual. It won't work if it's just in your head. Somehow you have to digest it and get it into your body and mind. And somehow you have to let go of the past. And somehow, what is the somehow? Is that spiritually? It'll happen spiritually. And somehow you have to change your behavior patterns. So that's why you go to a lot of meetings, to remind you of all the practice and the wonderful inspiration you can get from other people. But I didn't just do 12-step. I've done a lot of psychotherapy in my life, which was very, very helpful. But again, that psychotherapy doesn't do it alone, right? Because I had 40 years of psychotherapy and I know myself very well, and I consider it definitely a part of step 4 and step 5. I believe that professional help is a wonderful addition to step 4 and step 5. I can't say that enough, especially if you're a trauma survivor. You do need more help, as much help as you can get, as far as I'm concerned. So one thing that I had a lot of shame, that was also why I didn't want to do step 5, tell someone, because I thought it would just increase my shame. And the best thing I did to decrease my shame was going into a therapy group. So I was in a therapy group. I guess there were 8 people in the group plus 2 psychotherapists. I did it a long time, maybe 6 or 7 years. Of course, I was doing program as well. This was just a part of this integration that I was very grateful that I did between program, Buddhism, and psychotherapy. And, telling 6 people all of your faults and the history, and if you've had abuse, going through the stories in front of other people who are loving and kind in response, I believe that's one of the ways I got through my shame. was by sharing in an intimate setting that was made for letting go of my shame. The other thing, let me just see, there was something else I wanted to say. Well, it'll come around, I guess. Also, sharing with other people. So back to just, even if you're just doing it with one person, is it gets you right sized. I learned this in Al-Anon. They're very into right sized. So I think for me, I'm not saying this is you, I'm saying for me, the phrase, an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, really fit me. And when I did step 5, when I talked to another human being, that really got right sized. I'm not an egomaniac. I looked up in the dictionary what a megalomaniac means, and that's obsession with wealth, extravagant or grand ideas. I thought that was kind of funny, but I had all these grand ideas, and I thought I was the most famous artist that ever lived on the planet. But I had an inferiority complex too. So how do you balance these woundedness, I could say, these things that come out as being wounded? And one of the ways is by sharing them with other people and having other people tell you what is the more right sized kind of you. I'll just say one other thing about trauma, just for step 5. I was sexually abused as a kid and as a teenager, and I think that had a lot to do with compulsive eating and with alcoholism and my addiction. And I never told anyone because I knew it wasn't safe to tell my parents. When I told my mom when I was in program, so I was in my 20s, and my mom said, "Oh yeah, Uncle Lou did that to everybody." That was her response. So, and I have forgiven my mother. Thank you very much. 12 steps, I've forgiven my mother. But she just didn't have the knowledge or the tools or anything to deal with that type of a trauma. So I didn't tell anyone. And you know what? The first time I told anyone was in my first step 5. So that's a big whopper of a deal. And also to have someone who loved me up in spite of all the defense mechanisms that I created in myself to handle the pain of that by myself. And there are a lot of people, both men and women in program, who have this background. There's a lot of people who come from violent families, and we didn't cause it, we can't cure it. And there's a big healing that needs to take place. And in my opinion, if you do the steps, you can have the grace to heal. All right, so now I want to move into, I was thinking all week, like, what do I want to say about step 5? And now I'm going to broaden the telescope a little bit, because I would like to talk about forgiveness. And I kind of think it starts in step 5. When I look at the steps, that seems to be where it starts to open up, where someone else can forgive you, where God can forgive you. Self-forgiveness is by far the hardest, in my opinion. But so I'd like to talk about forgiveness, because now, after all these years, I'm 72, I've been teaching Zen, people look up to me as a spiritual teacher. And I always have a chuckle. I'm glad we don't do that in 12 step. Everyone's equal here, because putting people up on a pedestal is not very good for them, especially if they're megalomaniacs with an inferiority. Although I'm joking, okay, this is a joke, but I did do good work. I did very good work as a Zen teacher. I'm good at what I do, but it's not good for my program to have that be the only place where I'm seen as a human being. So forgiveness, let me just talk forgiveness. It's the primary spiritual quality that helps me get serenity at this point. And I'm kind of, may I say, I'm kind of a mature 12-stepper now. So I'm very involved with how do you forgive? How do you forgive other people? How do you forgive yourself? And how do you ask for forgiveness from those that you have hurt, which is kind of an amends in the amends steps. But forgiveness, it's a step 3 thing. Forgiveness is not something you can will. Forgiveness isn't something that a frontal lobe is going to say, oh, I think you should forgive that person. In fact, if I go by my frontal lobe, if I go by my ego, I can say, Judith Ragir will never forgive anybody. She knows how to hold a grudge. I am a resentment-filled person if I don't work my steps. That's another reason I go to a meeting in the morning every day, because if I don't, I let my resentments get the best of me. So I go in the morning and I hear, resentments will not get you where you want to go. They will not heal you. They will not give you self-love, and they will not bring you peace. So how do you forgive? And I would like to say forgiveness is on a spectrum or a line that, and it's part of the digestion process that I've been talking about, which I believe step 4 through 9 is about digesting our past and letting it go and being able to be reborn with new attitudes. So in the digestion process, there was a part, I think it's about here, what is that, like third of the way through my step work, I just said to my sponsor, you know what? I just want to be honest. That's the spiritual quality. That's one of the precepts, is not to lie. And I said, for the next few years, I'm just going to be honest that I resent these people, that I resent my past, and I allowed my anger to be there because it was the most authentic place that I was. And I think that's part of the process. So I wasn't, and when people would say, you should forgive them, I wanted to punch them in the nose. I'm sorry, I'm not there yet. So that's part of the process of getting to forgiveness, is letting yourself be where you're at and keep working the steps. This is all the willingness part, willing to make amends, willing to let go of your character defects. We're willing to be in a process which doesn't always look like the result. My new teacher, Philip Moffitt, always says, I practice. I don't practice resulting. So we just practice the steps and we accept ourselves where we are. But once you get past that, when you get kind of over here, where is that, 3/4 of the way, or maybe a little past 3/4 of the way? And if you're working your spiritual life, What does that mean? You're praying, you're meditating, you're going to meetings, you're doing some kind of service. If you're practicing your spiritual life, there will come a time that circumstances will happen and you will have the grace to forgive. It's a grace. It happens to me. And what step is that? 4, 5, 6, and 7. Step 7. That God will do for me what I couldn't do for myself. It's a grace to forgive. And it happens at a certain point in your digestion, in your process, that you're able to forgive. So that's kind of the qualifying statement. And then I want to say one cool thing in Buddhism is they have a meditation for forgiveness. So I know I'm on step 5, but I'm kind of going all over the place now, because part of step 6 is fertilizing the soil, cultivating the soil for changing your habit patterns. And part of the willingness before the immense is cultivating the soil of forgiveness. So although you can't will forgiveness, I believe you can cultivate the soil. You can make your environment ripe so that you can get the grace of forgiveness. So what I'd like to do now, and I think I have time still to do it, there is a beautiful forgiveness meditation that I got from, originally got from Jack Kornfield, who is an insight meditation teacher, very kind of famous insight meditation teacher. So this comes from the insight Theravadan tradition, but now it's used a lot of different Buddhist people use this meditation. And I have used it a lot to cultivate the soil of my learning about forgiveness and being willing to forgive. So I've written it down. I wasn't able to get it on one page. I'm not very good at PowerPoints, but I've written it down, so we'll put it in your WhatsApp so you can have it when you go home. But I would like to do it now with you. And I just say, if you don't like this idea of meditating on forgiveness, or you don't want to do it, or you're in the place where no way in hell am I going to forgive that person, then just hear it kind of intellectually, like with curiosity, like, oh, this is what Judith is bringing to the table. I don't believe it, but I'll listen. So that's one level. And then the other level is to listen and to bring it into your heart and see if you can't have a felt sense of what it might be like to soften your heart in this way. Does that sound okay? If you think that's okay, will you give me a, yeah, okay, because it's a little different, but this is a workshop, right? So, all right, now let me see if I can share my screen again. Yes. And now we're going to move into the forgiveness meditation. Now I'm going to read these and give their space for you to taste them, chew the cud. I might even say them twice each. So you don't have to read it unless you're doing this intellectually and you want to read it. You can close your eyes, you can get into a meditative space, and I am going to read it. Okay. So find a place how you want to sit, lie down, or close your eyes, or keep your eyes open. And really, when I meditate, the first thing I do is try to reconnect with my body. How am I doing in there? and reconnect with my breath. So let's just take a pause to catch up with myself, as Philip Moffat would say. So just take a pause, listen. Where are you at in your body? How's your mind? Is it racing or quiet? You don't have to change anything, but just know where you are. Self-connect. Breathing, feeling the breath. You can feel the breath as the air going into your lungs, but you also can feel the full breath. The air goes into your lungs, but then the oxygen goes into your blood, and then every cell of your body breathes in. And then every cell detoxes itself. It all goes to the lungs and the heart, and the lungs exhale and get rid of that which you don't need. So now we're going to enter into the forgiveness meditation, which is meant to cultivate the soil of our heart, like a farmer would cultivate the field and fertilize the field, even before he plants a seed. This is not about results. This is about practice and cultivation. So it's divided into 3 parts. One is asking for forgiveness from others. One is offering forgiveness to yourself. And the last one is forgiving those who have harmed or hurt you. So we'll just start with the first section, asking for forgiveness from others. And there's a paragraph, each one of these has a paragraph that I have basically memorized. So when I do this meditation, sometimes I do it by itself, but sometimes I incorporate it into the meditation I'm already doing. There are many ways that I have hurt and harmed others, have betrayed or abandoned them, caused them suffering, knowingly or unknowingly. Out of my pain, fear, anger, and confusion, I did these actions, and I ask for your forgiveness. Now, what's really important to me is knowingly or unknowingly. That unknowingly opens up the whole space that I don't even know if I hurt you, but probably I did out of my pain, fear, anger, and confusion. There are many ways that I have hurt and harmed others, have betrayed or abandoned them, caused them suffering, knowingly or unknowingly, out of my pain, fear, anger, and confusion. I ask for your forgiveness. The next section is offering forgiveness to yourself. One of the harder things to do. There are many ways that I have hurt and harmed myself. I have betrayed and abandoned myself many times through thought, word, or deed, knowingly and unknowingly. For the ways I have hurt myself through action or inaction, out of fear, pain, and confusion, I now extend a full and heartfelt forgiveness. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. And sometimes I say it with my name. Judith, I forgive you. Judith, you're forgiven. There are many ways that I have hurt and harmed myself. I have betrayed and abandoned myself many times through word, thought, or deed, knowingly and unknowingly, through action or inaction. Out of fear, pain, and confusion, I now extend a full and heartfelt forgiveness. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. I'm cultivating the soil so that I can forgive myself. Forgiveness for those who have hurt or harmed you. And there's a line in here which is, to the extent that I am ready, which is very important. You might not be ready to do this part yet, but you can listen to it. Or you might be ready. To the extent that you're able, we're going to forgive the perpetrators. There are many ways that I have been harmed by others, abused or abandoned. Knowingly or unknowingly, in thought, word, or deed. I now remember the many ways others have hurt, harmed me, or wounded me out of fear, pain, confusion, and anger. I have carried this pain in my heart too long. And to the extent that I am ready, I offer them forgiveness. To those who have caused me harm, I offer my forgiveness. I forgive you. I forgive you. There are many ways that I have been harmed by others, abused or abandoned. Knowingly or unknowingly, in thought, word, or deed. I now remember the many ways others have hurt, harmed me, or wounded me out of their fear, pain, confusion, and anger. I have carried this pain in my heart for too long. To the extent that I'm ready, I offer them forgiveness. To those who have caused me harm, I offer my forgiveness. I forgive you. I can forgive you because I know that it came out of your fear, pain, confusion, and anger. To the extent that I am ready, I forgive you. And now just come back. You can open your eyes, and I'd like you to just look around your room. Just notice whatever objects, whatever attracts your attention, and let the room bring you back to the present moment where nothing is happening. And let that just kind of center you again after a pretty intense meditation. For me, anyway, even just reading it to you, I almost started to cry at one point. So before we open the floor, I'd just like to say a couple of things that I've been going to this Buddha Fest, which is Tricycle's magazine online celebration of the Dalai Lama's birthday. And it has all these lectures and films about the Dalai Lama. But I bring this up because his whole message is kindness, and he does not harbor hatred, and he doesn't hate the Chinese. And he's done for all of his life these kind of meditations, compassion meditations for the predicament of human life. For in Buddhism, they call it dukkha, the suffering that is inherent in life, because most of us are just living our life through our ego's perspective. Me, my. And it gets us into a lot of trouble. And Buddhism and the 12 relieve me of the bondage of self so that I can do the universe's will. What is Judith Ragir supposed to be doing with her life that is not based on my ego? And it's not based on my egomaniac who just wants to be praised and be cool and all the things the ego likes. So I really felt the Dalai Lama, that he, through his Buddhist practice, through his spiritual life, he's learned how to release his hatred. And man, when I look at what's happening in the world, this is very, very important. And the way it starts, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, it starts with you. It starts with your life. It starts with not hating your enemy, because there were causes and conditions that produced your enemy. And we have to be compassionate to their life. Like, just take my parents, who had a very successful materialistic life, but they harmed their children in a lot of ways. But they didn't have any tools. They didn't have psychotherapy. They were coming out of World War II. They were Jews. People had thrown tomatoes at them when they went to high school. My dad fought in the war. They didn't know. They had reasons for how they behaved. My dad's violence had a cause. And the way I forgave him was I explored the causes. I went to Auschwitz-Birkenau. It's in my book if you're interested in reading about this. But part of my amends making was to go to Auschwitz-Birkenau and see what oppression and that kind of genocide, how that creates hatred in the hatreds and violence in the generation after them, many generations. And we can see in the Middle East, thousands of generations has produced that violence. And I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying this is the karmic reality of human life. And the 12 steps have taught me that it begins with me. I have to let go of my resentments. I have to find love, forgiveness, or compassion for my enemies. And I have to make amends. And then maybe I can be free. And that free person maybe can help other people. So I'll stop with that.